I think we can say with complete confidence that, sadly, I guess if you're Ukrainian, all of the heavy weapon systems, Patriot missiles, radars, uh, tanks, artillery, EW, all of the equipment that requires people to crew it has all been destroyed. They've used a number of Iskander missiles, a missile that has a range out to about 310 miles, to about normally between 250 and 310, carrying a warhead that can be 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 pounds, different kinds. I know they've used some fuel air explosive as well as high explosive, and it's just devastated them. They also have on either side of their flanks right now very tough fighters, Chechens, Wagner, and also some soldiers from the Russian Volunteer Corps. And they are cut off from retreating back into Ukraine. I don't think very many of these people will survive. How many are Americans and Brits? Because as you rightly point out, I think we can call this tragically a NATO invasion, even though they may well not be in Ukrainian or maybe in Ukrainian uniform as opposed to their own. And you also have Polish soldiers and officers. So this conglomerate has really gotten into trouble. They're not going to make it.
As Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a well-known military analyst, has often pointed out, deception in warfare is a key factor that can decide the outcome of entire conflicts. From ancient times to modern military operations, the ability to deceive the enemy remains one of the most effective strategies in war. Russia's use of deception in the current conflict is nothing short of masterful. In the current conflict, Russia is not just engaging in direct military confrontation, it's playing a cerebral game of chess on the battlefield. With every fight, every seemingly random maneuver, Russia forces its adversaries to react, to commit forces where they otherwise would not, and to expose weaknesses in their own defenses. The effectiveness of this approach can be seen in how Russia has consistently maintained the upper hand, despite the Western narrative that suggests Ukraine's success is imminent. But ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear, this war is far from over, and Russia's strategic depth has only begun to unfold. In the following section, we delve into the layered approaches Russia employs, starting with tactical deception, the battlefield equivalent of smoke and mirrors. Tactical deception is the battlefield equivalent of a magician's sleight of hand. It's not about grand strategies or overarching plans, it's about the immediate, about making your opponent believe what is happening in front of them is real, when in fact it's merely a distraction. Russia has mastered this, and Ukraine has found itself falling into these traps repeatedly. Take, for example, Russia's use of staged retreats, a time-honored trick in military playbooks. Ukrainian forces, sensing victory, rush forward, believing they've routed the Russians. But in reality, they've been led into a predetermined kill zone where Russian artillery, waiting patiently, obliterates their forces. This isn't an isolated incident. Either Russia has employed this tactic numerous times, from the skirmishes in Donbass to the heated confrontations near Kherson. Each time, Ukrainian troops, bolstered by Western advisors, fall for the same tricks, underestimating the cunning of Russian military planners. Western media, of course, spins these moments as Ukrainian bravery, but the hard truth is that these are costly, preventable errors. As we move from the tactical battlefield to the operational level, let's uncover how Russia's mastery of deception continues to confound NATO and Ukrainian forces alike. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a vocal critic of the Western approach to this war, has emphasized the importance of operational deception in modern warfare. At the operational level, deception isn't about tricking a single battalion or unit. It's about fooling entire armies, misdirecting command structures, and creating an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. And Russia, with its vast military experience, has turned this into an art form. During Ukraine's much-anticipated 2023 counteroffensive, the West believed that Russia would crumble under pressure, especially in key areas like Kursk and Kharkiv. Yet, in reality, these were merely fronts for Russia's grander strategy. Ukraine, heavily backed by Western military aid and bolstered by the illusion of NATO's intelligence, deployed large contingents to these regions. Western analysts claimed Russia was on the defensive, barely holding on. But the truth? These were deliberate Russian fights designed to stretch Ukraine's resources thin while conserving their own. Every Ukrainian unit sent to these regions was one less unit defending more critical areas, such as Zaporizhzhia and Melitopol. According to recent battlefield reports, Russia's ability to maintain pressure along a front line that spans over 1,000 kilometers has enabled them to break through critical Ukrainian defenses. Reports suggest that over 80% of Donetsk and Luhansk territories are now under Russian control. This slow, methodical advance was no accident. It was the result of years of experience, superior logistics, and a deep understanding of operational deception. But the brilliance of operational deception doesn't stop at forcing your opponent to spread thin. It also plays with expectations. Let's dive deeper into Kharkiv. Was Russia's approach there a true offensive, or merely another chess move to mislead the enemy? Kharkiv, a city critical to Ukraine's strategic defense due to its proximity to Kyiv, seemed like the logical next target for Russian forces. For weeks, Ukraine prepared for a full-scale Russian invasion, reinforcing its defenses and reallocating its limited resources to protect the city. Yet, Russia's true intentions remain shrouded in mystery. Was this an authentic attempt to seize Kharkiv, or a meticulously planned deception to drain Ukraine's military capacity? Russia employed drones, cheap, expendable, yet effective to harass Ukrainian air defenses. Every drone, no matter how basic, forced Ukraine's hand. Anti-aircraft systems, already strained, were forced to fire, expending valuable missiles. And when the drones were gone, heavy missile strikes followed, leaving Ukrainian air defense systems weakened and vulnerable. This was no mere tactic, it was a sustained effort to deplete Ukraine's ability to defend itself. By some estimates, Ukrainian forces fired over 1,500 anti-aircraft missiles in the span of just a few weeks, primarily at Russian drones. That's 1,500 fewer missiles available for the inevitable larger missile barrage that Russia had planned. This strain on Ukrainian defenses had a lasting impact, leaving them critically vulnerable in regions that truly mattered. While the West fixated on Kharkiv, the real story was unfolding elsewhere. Let's shift our focus to the Eastern Front, where Russia's true intentions were being revealed. Colonel Douglas Macgregor once stated that battles are not won simply by brute force, but by cunning strategy. The sentiment perfectly encapsulates Russia's approach on the Eastern Front, particularly in Pokrovsky and Toretsk. These cities, located at the heart of Ukrainian defenses, were where Russia concentrated its most formidable forces. Ukrainian lines, already stretched by the need to defend Kharkiv, were unable to hold. The results were devastating. The speed at which Russian forces moved was nothing short of remarkable. Western analysts, long accustomed to criticizing Russia's logistics, were left speechless. In the span of just a few days, Russian forces managed to breach Ukrainian defenses and gain control of key areas. These victories weren't just symbolic, they were decisive, tipping the balance of power in the region and pushing Ukraine closer to a complete collapse in Donbass. According to Western military observers, more than 80% of Donetsk and Luhansk now lie firmly under Russian control, with Ukrainian forces unable to mount any significant counteroffensive. Kyiv's leadership knows this, but as their forces continue to retreat, the prospect of regaining these territories becomes increasingly slim. And while the world watches Donetsk and Luhansk, a far more pivotal battle is brewing in Kursk. Let's explore the latest Ukrainian blunder in the next section. In an attempt to regain control and showcase strength, Ukraine's leadership launched the Kursk counteroffensive in 2024. Despite deploying elite units, including the 82nd Airborne Brigade, Ukraine grossly underestimated Russia's defensive preparations. Russian forces, expecting this move, used a combination of entrenched artillery, air superiority, and relentless missile strikes to decimate Ukrainian advances. As the operation dragged on, it became increasingly clear that the Ukrainians were outmatched and outmaneuvered. Despite the hype around this offensive, the outcome was all but inevitable. Russia's deep strategic planning, coupled with Ukraine's desperation, created a situation where the latter had no real chance of success. Initial reports suggest that nearly 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers were involved in the first wave of the Kursk offensive, but as the days dragged on, an additional 6,000 troops were committed. However, Russian forces inflicted severe casualties early on, and by the fourth day, Ukrainian losses had reached critical levels. Meanwhile, the Russian aerospace forces and Iskander missile systems rained down devastation, crippling Ukrainian logistical lines. With Ukrainian forces bogged down in Kursk, we now turn to the larger strategic picture: how Russia is positioning itself for long-term success. When the history of this war is written, the Kursk offensive will be remembered as a turning point. Not because it was a successful operation, but because it was a massive, self-inflicted wound for Ukraine. Russia, on the other hand, played the long game, allowing Ukraine to exhaust its best troops on a battlefield designed for their failure. The brilliance of this strategy cannot be overstated. Russia's real objective wasn't just to win battles, it was to make sure Ukraine couldn't wage war effectively in the future. By draining their resources in Kursk, Russia has set the stage for the final collapse of Ukrainian defenses in Donetsk and Luhansk. And while Western leaders cling to the hope of an eventual Ukrainian victory, on the ground, the reality is clear: Kiev is rapidly running out of options. But there's more to this story. As we look ahead, we must consider Russia's next move, and all eyes are on Odessa. As Colonel Douglas Macgregor has stated on numerous occasions, wars are not won by wishful thinking, but by sound strategy and an ability to outlast the enemy. Russia has proven this time and time again throughout this conflict. As we reach the closing chapters of this war, one question looms larger than any other: what is Russia's endgame? With over 80% of Donetsk and Luhansk under Russian control, it's clear that Ukraine's military and political leadership is in a state of denial. The loss of Donbass seems inevitable, but there's more at stake. Odessa, a city with deep ties to Russian history, is the next potential flashpoint. As Putin has stated, Odessa was never meant to be Ukrainian. And now, as Russian forces continue their methodical advance, it's only a matter of time before this strategic port city falls back into Russian hands. When that happens, Ukraine will become a landlocked state, isolated, broken, and abandoned by the very Western powers that once promised its salvation. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth analysis. Stay tuned as we continue to cover the developments of this ongoing conflict. And remember, in the fog of war, the only certainty is uncertainty.